we have more information to share. Did you know that Iron Mace wants to remove PvE mode from Dark and Darker? Probably sometime at the end or next season. The entire season that was made for PvE mode, or known as Adventure mode, which is the no PvP, is no longer going to exist. So at the end of this season, not only are we deleting solos, are we deleting duos, but we're also going to remove everybody's PvE. So none of the players that came to this season for PvE mode are going to be able to play that anymore. Pretty crazy. Honestly, if you told me this yesterday, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have told you that SDF is crazy, but he's not that crazy to make an entire season based around something that he's going to remove the very next season. So let me go ahead and show you the SDF's kitchen Discord messages so you can see just how crazy it really is. Alright, I'm going to try my best to contain myself while I read these SDF messages because this is some next level crazy shit coming out of the lead developer of Dark and Darker. Let's move on to another topic. This time it will be good to focus on the changes made to test server. I'm not quite sure where to start. From my perspective, it's a complicated matter with many intertwined elements, but I'll try to explain it anyway. Then let me start by talking about the removal of adventure mode and the ongoing squeezing of party types. What I'm aiming for in dungeon gameplay is a sense of naturalness. I often imagine what it would be like if we were truly adventuring in a medieval fantasy world. How would we appear inside a dungeon? In such a world, it would be natural to see adventurers with different goals and groups of various sizes. Of course, a real medieval fantasy world doesn't exist, so we can only experience it through creative works like novels, movies, and games. But, at least in the world I imagine, that's how it would be. From that perspective, the existence of dungeons and limited to PvE only, or item brackets meant to reduce gear differences, or requiring different fixed party sizes like solo, duo, trio to enter the same dungeon, without any kind of special magic or justification, feels very artificial. I would just like to take a quick moment to mention, feel free to take an eye on the clown emojis. SDF is doing very good at farming these from these posts, so that's one good thing that comes from these messages. That said, it's true. We don't actually live in that world, so at times artificial adjustments can make the game more enjoyable. And we decided to explore that direction. Right, PvE, solos, duos. For example, when we chose to add the Goblin Cave for solo players, way back in playtest 4 by the way, we could also have pursued a version that supported mixed party types. But we were also genuinely curious about the potential of solo play. Adding a solo queue in a dedicated dungeon was something that we can move forward with quickly, and in many ways it was an attractive option for us. Both the players and our team enjoyed this direction for a while. However, as the time went on and we tried to expand it further, we began to see side effects emerge. There were class balance issues for solos, such as Druid. My god, Druid. Teaming became a frequent issue in solo play, and because we were limited to solo queue to just the Goblin Cave, we never built each dungeon tailored for solo, duo, or trio. This created friction when players tried to engage with content in ways it wasn't specifically designed for. All of this began to interact with the gear brackets we had introduced to address gear disparity, and at some point, everything started turning into spaghetti. That's when I realized something important. We simply couldn't maintain or meaningfully improve all of this in a sustainable way. The cost of trying, testing, and supporting all these systems was too much development time. To give one example, when building PvE dungeons, we had to audit every class ability to ensure nothing would disrupt the PvE experience. Even with that effort, we missed things. We couldn't deliver it perfectly, and even now it isn't perfect. So I've decided that, at least for the time being, it's better for us to reduce the number of things we need to manage and focus our energy on what truly matters. I'm sorry. So, yeah. Solos, duos, and PvE mode is very, very likely going to be removed by next season or at the end of the leaderboards, whenever they decide to do it. And I'm just going to say one thing. This is not a video to advertise other games, but I just want to say this right here, where he talks about other dungeons not being built for different game mode types. Mistfall Hunter, I played the beta like a month or so ago. In the 4 months that that game was gone and then came back for another playtest, they created solo gameplay and built the balancing for solos. I don't know how we already have other extraction games coming out with solo mode already being more balanced than trio mode than Dark and Darker as far as PvE is concerned. But way back in the day, it's actually on Discord somewhere. SDF said that they wanted to balance the other, maps on solo for PvE, and it just never happened. I don't know what it is that allows this other company to do something like that in just a few months and create more classes and all that other stuff, while these guys just seem to not be able to do any of that. I don't really know what's going on with the development over there, but just thought that was interesting to mention. Now, for the time being, I plan to explore a direction where players with different goals and party types can coexist within the dungeon. Some of you may remember our previous test in the High Roller mode, where we removed name tags from party members. That experiment moved in the opposite direction of making trios easier to coordinate, but it was ultimately an attempt to see if we could naturally reduce the advantage of trio play so that various party types could comfortably exist in the game. As for supporting well-organized trios and improving their experience, I'd like to explore features that will enhance in-game communication tools, better ways to find players with shared goals and language preferences through Gathering Hall, and faster ways to connect with teammates through a guild system. You thought we were done? Now let's talk about random modifiers. I think I've mentioned a few times before that I wanted to remove them, though I'm not sure if anyone remembers. The current implementation of random modifiers doesn't contribute to gear disparity. It has a significant impact on readability and the movement speed meta. Then why did you strengthen random modifiers this season, the opposite of what you're saying now? So before I get into anything else, let me address that. Yeah. So this season had the craziest random modifiers I think we've seen in a long time. All attribute, movement speed on every piece of gear. So it's very contradictory to what he's saying. As I mentioned earlier, random modifiers were introduced experimentally and have been a core part of the game for a long time, bringing both meaningful impact and many side effects. On the positive side, they provided build variety and increased item value, giving players a reason to keep playing. Of course, we were also well aware of the negative side effect and received plenty of feedback and suggestions about them. Still, I wanted to spend more time working with the system myself to fully understand it. Along the way, we experimented with adjusting the power of modifiers, sometimes reducing or increasing the stats they provided. Early on, when we lowered their power, we received a lot of negative feedback that made farming feel less rewarding and diminish the overall fun. I think he's referring to patch 69. Pretty sure. We've long believed that gear gap, especially with how much time it demands from players, is a major issue. However, as I mentioned earlier, rather than tackling the root of the problem, we tried to respond by increasing item drop rates or dividing players into brackets. I don't know about you guys. I think the increased item drop rates and the gem change recently was very good for the game. I think so, at least. Keeping that feedback in mind, I felt that this season, especially with the introduction of Adventure Mode and the highest number of modes brackets we've ever had, was a good opportunity to test what would happen if we made random modifiers stronger. I wanted to see how players would respond to that. It will be good to also explain and cover the all attribute and movement speed options while we're at it. When I tested the all attribute options multiple times, though it's been a while, my memory's a little fuzzy, I wanted to verify whether this option gave a relative advantage to the frontline classes. After conducting several tests, I agree with the negative feedback and didn't see much necessity for it, so I eventually removed it. However, over time I forgot about it. Yeah, SDF forgot about all attribute and how much it didn't belong in the game. I couldn't make this up if I tried. and someone suggested that applying a small amount of it to certain slots like necklaces might be fun, so I tried it again. That said, I've always considered this option to not so much enhance build variety as boost characters evenly, which only widens the gap. It's crazy to see this all in words, because I don't understand how he can forget how broken all attribute is, especially when you consider that uniques can roll +4 all now instead of only +1. You can have these absurd unique gear sets that are only possible because of the updates that SDF did for this season. It's crazy to me. This is even a thing. I can explain the movement speed options simply. Before diving fully into the movement speed meta, there was one thing I wanted to verify. Clerics who lack ranged attacks and mobility have generally been less favored outside of their healer role, except for a period for buff ball. They look very helpless when losing to faster classes. So I wanted to check if clerics could still perform strongly, even without range attacks when given maximum movement speed. To help with this, I asked good cleric players who reached warlord rank in our team. As a result, mid-low level play combat clerics are very powerful and popular, but at high tier there's little difference. To sum up simply, I wanted to see how combat would unfold if everyone had 330 speed. It would be ideal to test all these details internally, but we don't have the capacity. Still, we plan to use the test server as much as possible moving forward. So we have the movement speed meta, basically because SDF knows that caster cleric sucks, I guess, in solo, and wanted them to be viable. And instead of just giving them like a crossbow or something, he just made every class possible to have 330 speed and just said, yeah, it's probably good enough. It's pretty crazy reading this out. Yeah. Let's return to the topic of random modifiers. While they are currently removed from test server, this is just a starting point. We haven't yet decided whether we'll remove them entirely or keep them in another form, like the uniques we've experimented with. The final decision will be made based on how testing goes on the test server. Our goal is to preserve the advantages while removing or minimizing downsides. But one thing is certain, the final version will not be the same as what exists right now. Once this round of testing is complete and the direction is finalized, I hope it will become easier to predict the general capabilities of an opponent based on what they're wearing. Ideally, we'll no longer see fighters wearing full plate running extremely fast thanks to stacking movement speed on every piece. Based on this new foundation, we'll likely need to go through and retune the abilities of all classes again. I can only imagine what this means. And I expect item drop rates will also need to be adjusted again to match these changes. This game is going to be so great. I can't even imagine what's going to go on in the next few months of this game. I'm probably done playing this game for good because I'm not going to play solos anyway. So if there's no solos, I'm not going to play. But this is just crazy seeing here, written from our lead developer. My original vision for items was that gears should be a means to an end, not an end itself, and their value should never be too high. Too many lines on each piece of gear random modifiers drastically increase the rarity of this due to excessive RNG. This consumes too much player time and widens the gear gap to the point where you can't compete without investing that time. Inflates gear value and encourages RMT. Doesn't mean I want to make everything flat, but it just means that things have gone too far. You know what's interesting? I've been saying since the start of the season, I don't know why they ever even buffed modifiers from last season. I thought last season was pretty balanced, and then they went super crazy for some reason. And now we're at this point where it sounds like they're going to return, even if it's not completely back to patch 69, which makes gear super boring because every gear is basically the same and there's not really much progression. It might go at least somewhat similar to that. I wish we just never moved away from last season. And I don't know, man. It's really, really scary for, the players that like this game to see all of this. I just can't imagine what is going through this guy's mind that he wants to remove PvE mode and solo duo, which is the whole season was about PvE mode. I just don't understand. I just don't get it. Help me understand, SDF. How do you do this? I don't know. That's gonna be the video. I don't have anything else to say. I saw this and I had to share it. I'm not trying to be a Dark and Darker news channel, But every day, SDF says something even crazier than yesterday. So I think he's just trying to farm as many clown emojis as possible. Maybe it unlocks a new Discord achievement. See you guys. Thanks for watching the video. Peace.